You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I sat there, cold metal biting into my back, staring at the hardwood table like it owed me something. The courtroom buzzed with the tension of unfinished business, and I could feel it all around me. Laura was on the other side, leaning back in her chair like she owned the place. I'd seen that look before, confident, smug, like she had me all figured out. She glanced over at me, almost amused. "You always were predictable, Matt. Just a workhorse, plugging away, doing what I asked," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Easy to take advantage of." The room murmured at her words, like she was saying something profound. I didn't flinch. I knew what she was doing, trying to paint me as the dull, dependable guy who never questioned anything. The quiet one, the safe one. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Her lawyer started with the usual spiel, demanding alimony, citing the years she'd sacrificed for me, for the marriage. I didn't say a word, not yet. Let them think they had me cornered. I had a plan, and it wasn't just about her. This was about me taking back control. She'd have her say. Then it was my turn. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, letting the silence stretch between us for a beat. Then I spoke, my voice calm but cold. "You know, Laura, you're right about one thing," I started, watching her lean in, that look of smugness still etched across her face. "I was predictable. I worked long hours, took on the financial strain, supported your lifestyle. It's funny, though, how none of that ever seemed to be enough." Her eyes narrowed. She was used to being the center of attention in that room, but now it was my turn to speak. "I did everything for you. I put in the hours while you went shopping, took vacations, lived a life that I helped fund. It was all supposed to be for us, right? For the future we were building together." I let the words sink in, then paused for effect. "But it was always your future, wasn't it?" The murmurs in the room picked up a little, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about what I was going to do next. Slowly, I unbuttoned my shirt, one button at a time, my eyes locked on Laura's. She shifted in her seat, the confidence beginning to crack. "You think I haven't noticed how you always pointed out what I wasn't? What I didn't do enough of, how I was too quiet, too safe, too boring. I was predictable, right? The man who never asked for anything in return. The guy who was content just doing the work. But now, you're about to learn how much I've changed, because I'm not that guy anymore." I tossed my shirt to the side, letting it fall to the floor with a soft thud. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I stood up slowly, like I had all the time in the world, letting the full impact of my transformation settle in. My chest, once soft and tired from years of long hours and late nights, was now lean and defined. The muscles in my arms flexed slightly, and I could hear the low gasps in the room. I didn't need to look around to know the effect it was having. Laura's smug expression had completely evaporated. She shifted in her chair again, her hand going to her mouth as if trying to hide the growing unease. She couldn't hide from it, though. Not anymore. "I'm not that predictable guy you walked out on," I said, my voice lower now, filled with the steady assurance of someone who had been through hell and come out the other side. "I've changed, not just physically, but emotionally. And this courtroom, this is part of the plan. You're not going to walk away from this one like you always have." I could see it now, the panic in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw. She didn't like this version of me. It was easier when I was the safe, quiet guy, the one she could control. But now, I was standing in front of her, something she hadn't counted on. A man who'd learned to take back his dignity, to reclaim his life. I looked directly at her, letting the silence hang in the air between us, just long enough to make her squirm. "I'm taking back everything, Laura, and I'm starting with this." I leaned back in my chair, the silence still hanging heavy in the air, and reached for the folder of documents I had prepared. I wasn't in a rush. The tension in the room was already thick, and I knew the next few minutes would change everything. "Now, let's talk about money, Laura," I said, setting the first document on the table, facing the judge. "Specifically, your money. Or rather, money that was supposed to be ours." I could feel her stiffen, her eyes flicking between me and the stack of papers. Her lawyer straightened up in his seat, probably sensing what was coming, but it was too late for them to stop it. I flipped through the stack, pulling out one page and slapping it down in front of the judge. "This here is a payment from our joint account to a luxury resort in the Bahamas, all labeled as a business trip. Funny, because I don't remember any business meetings in the Bahamas. Do you, Laura? She opened her mouth, probably ready to argue, but I was already on the next piece of evidence. I placed it down with a deliberate motion, each document more damning than the last. This one, I continued, is for a clothing store, almost $2,000 for business attire. Tell me, Laura, how many suits did you buy for yourself in the name of business? Her face was pale now, the color draining from her cheeks. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. My focus was on the documents, on the cold, hard facts that couldn't be ignored. This next one is my favorite, I said, sliding another paper forward. An apartment lease, in your name. But, of course, it's labeled as a business expense. So, tell me, Laura, when exactly did you need an apartment to further your career? I heard the sharp intake of breath from her lawyer. Objection, Your Honor, he said, but the judge didn't even look up. Let him continue, the judge said, motioning for me to keep going. I smiled. Thanks, Your Honor. I'll keep going. I turned back to Laura, who was sitting there, her mouth slightly open, trying to form words that wouldn't come. I have several more of these, I went on, all showing extravagant expenses you put on our account, all labeled as business, but you and I both know they were just part of your personal shopping spree, your little escape from reality, and you did it all while I was working myself into the ground, thinking I was doing what was best for us. I let the words hang in the air before turning to the judge. And here's the kicker. These signatures, I said, pulling out one last document and showing it to the judge, are hers. That's Laura's signature, no question about it. I didn't need to look at her anymore to know the panic was setting in. I turned to face her directly, my voice steady, unflinching. Care to explain these, Laura? Or do you have some other excuse for the tens of thousands of dollars you've siphoned off? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lawyer scrambled through his papers, clearly trying to find some loophole, but there wasn't one. It's all just a misunderstanding, she blurted out, her voice shaky, her face flushed with panic. I didn't do anything wrong. I shook my head slowly. That's not going to work, Laura. These documents don't lie. She tried to regain her composure, but her usual confidence had turned to desperation. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, the lies tumbling out of her in a disjointed mess. I turned to the judge, then back to Laura. The evidence is clear. You took money that wasn't yours, and you did it while pretending to support me. Her lawyer started to object again, but the judge held up a hand, silencing him. Mr. Matthews, the judge said, looking at me with a measure of approval. I believe you've made your point. I'll review the evidence further, but it seems there's more to this than just a divorce settlement. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Laura had already lost. The tension in the room was thick, and for the first time, I felt the weight of it shift in my favor. Laura's lawyer was scrambling through his papers, trying to find something, anything that could salvage this. But I knew it was too late. The damage had been done. I turned my attention to the judge, keeping my expression calm but unyielding. Your Honor, I'm not just going after alimony, not anymore. I let the words hang in the air. I could see Laura's eyes widen. Her perfect little plan was crumbling, and she knew it. Slowly, I leaned forward, setting the final stack of documents on the table with a deliberate, confident motion. I'm suing Laura for the money she stole from me, from us, I continued, keeping my voice steady. This isn't just about a divorce anymore. This is about fraud, and I intend to make her pay for it. The courtroom went deathly quiet. Her lawyer stopped rifling through his papers and looked up at me, eyes wide. Laura's face turned an even deeper shade of white, her eyes darting between me and the judge, her facade slipping by the second. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Mr. Matthews, I'm going to need more than an accusation. You'll need to provide clear evidence of this claim. I didn't blink. You've already seen the evidence, Your Honor. The documents are all here. We have the fraudulent transactions, the false business expenses, the signatures, all of it. I'm not just talking about money she used. I'm talking about money she stole under false pretenses. She's been siphoning it off for months, maybe years. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The atmosphere was changing from one of disbelief to something more palpable. Unease. The look on Laura's face was priceless. The self-assurance she'd walked in here with had melted away, and now she was visibly panicking. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her lawyer shot her a quick glance, his voice tight. This is completely unfounded, Your Honor. There's no evidence of criminal intent here. I looked at him, unmoved. I'd suggest you take a closer look at the documents, counselor. It's all there in black and white. Laura tried to recover, her voice high and defensive, but there was no hiding the fear creeping in. This is a mistake, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You're twisting things, Matt. You're taking this too far. We're just getting divorced. This is unnecessary. I didn't let her off the hook. You're right about one thing, Laura. It is unnecessary. It wasn't necessary for you to steal from me in the first place. If you'd kept your hands out of our accounts, we wouldn't be here. But now we are. The judge glanced down at the documents I'd presented, his expression unreadable, and then he looked back at me, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Matthews, this is serious. If what you're claiming is true, it could lead to criminal charges. I'll need to review all of this with more scrutiny. I'm calling for a full review of the financial records and a forensic audit to verify these claims. Laura's lawyer sputtered, looking for a way out, but the judge wasn't having it. He turned his attention to Laura, his tone shifting. If these allegations are confirmed, we will proceed accordingly. You're on notice, Mrs. Matthews. The shift in the room was immediate. Laura's face twisted in frustration, then panic. She shot a glance at Scott, who had been sitting quietly in the back, but he didn't offer her the same look of confidence he had when we first walked in. He looked uncomfortable, even guilty. I felt a quiet satisfaction spread through me as I watched the atmosphere turn from mockery to tense uncertainty. Laura's perfect little world was falling apart, and I had no intention of letting her rebuild it. Not now, not after everything she'd done. I leaned back, the weight of my next move pressing down on me like a slow, steady burn. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about making sure she understood that I wasn't the same man she had walked all over for years. I'd already taken control of the narrative, and I wasn't about to lose it now. The judge raised his hand, signaling for silence. We'll reconvene after a short recess while I review these claims. Mr. Matthews, I'll expect you to provide additional documentation. Mrs. Matthews, your assets are now frozen pending the investigation. We'll resume in 1 hour. As the gavel came down, I caught Laura's eyes one last time. The confident woman who'd been so sure of herself earlier was gone, replaced by something much less comfortable. And I knew in that moment, I had won. The gavel fell, signaling the brief recess, but I wasn't done. I could feel the eyes in the room on me, Laura's, her lawyer's, and Scott's, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, trying to blend into the shadows. But I knew exactly what he was up to. He thought he could stay on the sidelines, look calm, maybe even smug, like he was untouched by this mess. But I had other plans. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate as I turned to face him, my eyes locking onto his for just a second. He stiffened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face before he quickly averted his gaze. Before we adjourn, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, but carrying an edge, there's one more thing I need to address. One more piece of the puzzle that I'm sure you'll find quite interesting. I reached for another stack of documents, pulling them from the folder with a cool, practiced motion. The room grew quiet, anticipation hanging in the air. These, I continued, setting the documents on the table, show that Scott Hamilton, I made sure to use his full name, emphasizing it, has been helping Laura with the financial manipulation. I have here evidence that Scott, a corporate lawyer, was paid for legal services, even though he wasn't involved in any business transactions related to the company. Funny, right? I looked up at Scott, my eyes narrowing. I wonder what kind of legal advice he was giving, especially when it wasn't related to anything in the business. I'm sure you've got a good explanation for that, don't you, Scott? The room shifted, the murmurs rising as Scott's face tightened. The smirk he had been wearing earlier was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. He shifted in his seat, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. Laura, who had been trying to collect herself, shot him a panicked look, but it was too late. The documents were already on the table, the connections clear. I pulled out one of the payments listed under Scott's name, highlighting the transaction. Here's a payment for over $10,000 listed as legal services, but there's no record of him being involved in any actual legal work, just like Laura's fraudulent business expenses. Scott opened his mouth, likely to object, but nothing came out. His eyes darted around the room, looking for some way out. He was helping you, wasn't he? I said, turning back to Laura. Helping you move money around, making sure the fraudulent transactions went unnoticed. You both thought you could get away with it, didn't you? But now, you're both caught. Laura's lawyer stood up, desperate to stop the flood of information. Objection, Your Honor. This is pure speculation, baseless accusations. The judge didn't even flinch, his eyes steady as he glanced at Scott. Mr. Hamilton, you're a corporate lawyer. You've been paid a substantial amount by Mrs. Matthews here for services that don't seem to have any clear record. Do you care to explain that? Scott's face was drained of color now, the confident, untouchable persona falling apart. He stood up, shaking his head, his voice unsteady. I was just advising Laura on some personal matters. There's no connection to this case. This is just a misunderstanding. But the judge wasn't buying it. A misunderstanding, Mr. Hamilton? That's not what these documents suggest. I let Scott stumble over his words, his credibility unraveling by the second. I watched him sweat as he realized there was no way out of this. His smirk had completely vanished, replaced by the kind of panic that was hard to fake. You know what I think, Scott? I said, my voice lower now, deliberate. I think you were helping Laura because you saw an opportunity. You're not an innocent bystander here. You're an accomplice, whether you like it or not, and now you're about to be implicated in a financial fraud case. Scott opened his mouth to deny it, but he stopped himself, swallowing hard. He looked back at Laura, whose face was now an ugly mixture of anger and fear. Her carefully constructed life was coming down around her, piece by piece, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Your Honor, I said, turning back to the judge, I'd like to request a forensic audit of Scott Hamilton's involvement in these transactions. He's been helping Laura funnel money, and I believe the full extent of his role in this scheme has yet to be uncovered. The judge nodded, clearly processing the weight of the situation. Mr. Hamilton, I'll expect you to cooperate with the forensic audit. Your involvement in this case will be fully investigated. Mrs. Matthews, he turned to Laura, you are now under further scrutiny. The panic in Laura's eyes was palpable. She had started this mess, thinking she could play the system, but now she was stuck, tangled up in her own lies, with Scott by her side, both of them sinking deeper with every passing second. Scott looked at me, his face a mixture of fury and fear. But I didn't care. He had no power here anymore. He wasn't in control. I was. As the judge called for another recess to begin the review, I took one last look at Scott. His world was falling apart, just like Laura's, and I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. They had thought they could ruin me, but in the end, it was them who were getting exposed. The judge's gavel came down, a sharp crack that echoed through the tense silence of the room. His voice was firm, authoritative. Given the severity of these claims, I'm calling for a forensic audit of all financial records, including those involving Mr. Hamilton. We will determine the full extent of the fraud in this case. I felt a slow grin tug at my lips. Though I didn't show it, the satisfaction was building, but I wasn't done. Not yet. The room buzzed with hushed whispers as the judge's words settled in. Laura's lawyer had gone pale, and Scott, now visibly sweating, was practically squirming in his seat. I caught the briefest flicker of panic in his eyes before he quickly turned to Laura, trying to compose himself. Laura, for her part, was still trying to hold it together. Her hand gripped the edge of the table, as if that would somehow anchor her. But the tension was too much. She was cracking. I could see it, hear it in the tremor of her voice when she spoke to Scott. You have to fix this, she hissed, her voice low but desperate. You have to do something. Scott looked at her, his jaw tight, his brow furrowed. For a moment, he didn't answer, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating, wondering if he could still wiggle out of this mess. But when his gaze shifted to me, his expression shifted too. No more cocky smirks, no more pretending he was above it all. Laura, I can't do this anymore, he said quietly, his voice shaky. This is beyond me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Laura's eyes widened, then narrowed in disbelief. What? Number, you were the one who got me into this. You said we could... Enough, Scott cut her off, his voice breaking. I've already talked to my firm. They're distancing themselves from me. I can't afford this. You have to fix this yourself. It hit her like a slap in the face. For all her manipulation, all her calculated moves, there was nothing she could do to keep Scott tethered to her now. He was already backing away, realizing the full weight of his involvement. The whispers in the room intensified. Some were about Laura's now disheveled composure, others about Scott's rapidly unraveling career. A few of the jurors exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation settling on all of them, and I just sat back, watching it all. I wasn't here for the drama, but I wasn't blind to how satisfying it was to witness. Laura's carefully crafted life was falling apart, piece by piece. The image of the poised, successful woman she'd once presented to the world, it was gone. She was no longer the victim in this story. She was the villain, and that realization was hitting her like a ton of bricks. She turned to Scott, her voice now low and pleading. "Please don't do this. Don't turn your back on me. We can fix this. We have to fix this." Scott's face was pale, the fight gone from him. He shook his head slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "I can't help you anymore. I've got my own mess to deal with." Laura's grip on the table tightened, her knuckles white as she tried to regain control, her facade crumbling. "You can't just leave me like this. You promised me—" But Scott was already standing, his back turned to her. He didn't even bother to look back as he moved toward the exit. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the courtroom. Each step was a nail in the coffin of Laura's plans. She was losing everything, her money, her power, and now, the one person she thought she could count on. The judge cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to him. He was already preparing the next steps, but I wasn't focused on the process anymore. I was focused on the wreckage in front of me. Laura's perfect life had been built on deceit and manipulation, and now the truth was coming out, slowly and methodically, like the layers of a rotting structure being peeled back. "Mrs. Matthews," the judge said, his voice steady, but there was no sympathy in it. "All of your assets are now frozen, pending the outcome of the forensic audit. Any attempts to move or hide funds will be noted as obstruction of justice." I could see her face contort as she realized what that meant. The mansion, the designer clothes, the vacations, all of it was gone, frozen. There was nothing left to fall back on. I watched as the color drained from her face. The last bits of her carefully constructed world were slipping away, unraveling before her eyes. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about something deeper, reclaiming control, reclaiming the dignity she had stolen from me for so long. She had humiliated me, mocked me, taken everything I worked for, and now, the tables had turned. I wasn't the one on the defensive. She was. The judge began outlining the next steps, but I wasn't listening. I had already won. The rest was just paperwork. The judge's gavel came down again, signaling the recess. People started to shift in their seats, murmuring, but I stayed still. I didn't need to move just yet. I took a deep breath and let the weight of what had just happened settle in. This wasn't just a courtroom victory. It was something bigger, the kind of thing that would change everything. I glanced around, watching as Laura's world collapsed in real time. She was already turned toward her lawyer, her voice sharp and frantic as she demanded answers. "You have to do something. Now fix this," she hissed, eyes wide with panic. Her lawyer shuffled papers like he was looking for something that could turn the tide. But there was nothing left. I saw the frustration in his eyes. He knew the game was over, and I wasn't about to let him pull a fast one. She was already sinking deeper, and no amount of legal maneuvering could save her now. Across the room, Scott was standing near the back, his posture slumped. He had been so sure of himself, so confident when he walked in. But now, all I saw was a man who had just realized the weight of what he'd done. He wiped his brow, glancing at Laura like he didn't even recognize her anymore. I couldn't help but notice the shift in him. He wasn't the smirking, untouchable guy anymore. His skin was a shade paler, his movements slower. He wasn't here for Laura anymore. He was here to protect himself. Laura shot him a look, but it was different this time. She wasn't pleading for help like she had earlier. She was trying to make him see the urgency, trying to reassert control. "Scott, please, you can't just leave me. You promised we would handle this together." But Scott didn't even meet her eyes. Instead, he straightened his jacket, his fingers fidgeting with the cuffs as he glanced at the door. His expression was a mix of disbelief and fear. Fear of being implicated in something he clearly didn't want to face. "I can't do this anymore, Laura," he said, his voice low, almost strained. "I've got my own mess to clean up." She reached out a hand, but he was already backing away, taking small, deliberate steps toward the exit. Her eyes followed him, and for the first time, I saw the panic in her face, raw and real. She had been so sure of herself, so confident that she could control everyone around her. But now, even Scott was slipping through her fingers. Scott didn't look back. He didn't say another word as he exited the room, leaving her alone, abandoned. Her expression twisted in frustration, and she slammed her fist on the table, the sound echoing across the quiet courtroom. I could almost feel the coldness radiating off her. She was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do about it. The money, the power, the control, it was all slipping away. Fast. The murmurs around the room grew louder as people sensed the shift. I could hear whispers of scandal and fraud in the air, and I knew the story was going to spread. Laura's carefully crafted image was done. It wasn't just me in the courtroom who saw it. It was everyone. I didn't feel a shred of sympathy for her. Not after everything she had done, the humiliation she had put me through. This was just the beginning of her downfall, and I wasn't about to rush through the final act. I'd waited too long to get here. I glanced at my watch and leaned back in my chair, letting the calmness wash over me. I had no need to rush. The judge was reviewing the case, and soon enough, Laura's assets would be frozen for good. The forensic audit would dig deeper into her scheme, and Scott, his legal career was as good as over. His firm would be distancing itself from him, no matter how hard he tried to salvage it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally on solid ground. Laura had always been the one who controlled the narrative, but now it was mine to write. I watched her struggle in the chaos she'd created, the desperate look in her eyes as she turned to her lawyer again, demanding action that wouldn't come. The cracks in her mask were too wide now. The calm I felt wasn't out of malice. It was simply relief. I knew this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming everything she had taken from me, the control, the dignity, the respect. I had been the one humiliated, the one crushed by her lies. But now, I was standing tall, watching as her empire crumbled. And the worst for them? It hadn't even hit yet. The recess was over far too quickly. I'd spent the break sitting in silence, letting the room settle, watching as Laura tried and failed to maintain some semblance of control. But the damage was done, and she knew it. She couldn't talk her way out of this, no matter how hard she tried. The judge returned, and the atmosphere shifted again. The murmurs quieted down as everyone took their seats, and I could feel the tension hanging in the air. This was it, the final round. And I wasn't backing down. I stood when the judge motioned for me to present my case. I didn't waste time. I was done with the games. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "I have one more piece of evidence that will prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this entire divorce and financial fraud was a calculated effort to destroy me." I reached for the last document in the folder and slid it across the table. The tape recorder was tucked neatly inside, the small plastic casing glowing under the overhead lights. I knew this was the moment that would break everything wide open. Laura's eyes flicked to the recorder, and I saw her face go pale. Her hand went to her mouth, a nervous tick I hadn't seen before. She already knew what was coming. The judge looked at me, waiting. "Go ahead, Mr. Matthews." I pressed play. The voice on the recording was unmistakable. Laura's and Scott's. The conversation was crisp, like they had no intention of hiding anything, completely unaware that their words would be used against them. "Once we get Matt to agree to the settlement, we'll have him exactly where we want him. His assets will be frozen, but we can still drain his accounts. Then we'll be rid of him and have everything we need to start fresh," Laura's voice said, calm, calculating. "We can move his money around without him even realizing it." Scott's voice followed, equally cold. "Exactly. We'll make sure the divorce goes smoothly. Keep him distracted with the alimony stuff. Then we strip him of everything, and when he tries to fight back, we'll already be gone." I saw Laura's face go from pale to bloodless as the words played out. She opened her mouth, likely to protest, but I didn't give her the chance. "Your Honor," I said, cutting through her desperate stammering, "this is the proof. The conversation where they clearly outlined their plan to rob me blind. Laura and Scott weren't just preparing for a divorce. They were plotting a complete financial and emotional destruction of me." Laura's lawyer shot up in protest. "Objection, Your Honor. This is an illegally obtained recording. It's inadmissible." The judge didn't even blink. "Sustained. But I will allow it as part of the evidence that has already been submitted. Continue, Mr. Matthews." I looked directly at Laura. She was trying to regain her composure, but the cracks were deep now. The facade was gone. "I'm sure you'd like to deny this, Laura," I said, my tone flat. "But I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself. You and Scott worked together, behind my back, to make sure I lost everything. You weren't just trying to end a marriage, you were trying to destroy me." She looked at me, eyes wide with fear now, and for the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't expected: guilt. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a weak, shaky breath. I didn't mean," she began, but she didn't finish. She knew it wouldn't matter. The judge leaned forward, his expression hard. "Mrs. Matthews, I suggest you save your explanations for someone who's willing to listen. This is serious. I will not tolerate any further manipulation in this courtroom." I could hear the tremor in her voice as she tried one last time. "It's not like that, Matt. You don't understand." "Save it," I snapped. "The truth is out now." The judge didn't hesitate. "I'm issuing an immediate freeze on all of Mrs. Matthews' accounts and assets. Everything will be reviewed. Further investigation will follow, but for now, everything is frozen until we can confirm the extent of the fraud." I leaned back slightly, letting the words hang in the air. Laura's face, once so full of arrogance, was now twisted with fear and anger. Her carefully curated image had been shattered, and there was nothing she could do to fix it. She was no longer in control. "Your Honor," I said, my voice quieter now, but still cutting, "I've spent years in the shadows, letting her manipulate everything. This is my chance to take back what's mine, my life, my dignity." The judge nodded. "Understood, Mr. Matthews. You've made your case. The matter is under review. We will reconvene shortly." I didn't wait for the break to end. As the room buzzed with hushed conversations, I stood up, taking one last look at Laura. Her face was flushed with frustration, the anger barely contained, but it was all futile now. She had no power here. I knew I'd won, and not just in the courtroom. "Good luck, Laura," I muttered under my breath as I walked out. She wouldn't get away with this, not anymore. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. By the time I made it home that evening, news outlets were already covering the story. Laura's name was everywhere: fraud, embezzlement, criminal charges. The once pristine image she'd spent years crafting was shattered, exposed for the world to see. Her face was plastered across headlines like a mugshot. Her business, her social circles, everything she had built, crumbled in a matter of hours. Scott wasn't any better off. His firm wasted no time distancing themselves from him, issuing a statement, cutting ties as fast as they could. His career was over, and the more I thought about it, the more satisfying it became to know that it wasn't just the money that destroyed them. It was their own greed, their own arrogance. They thought they could get away with it, and now they were paying the price. That night, as I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone to avoid thinking about it all, a message popped up. The sender, Laura. "Matt, please, I need to talk. There's so much I didn't mean. I made a huge mistake. Can we meet?" I stared at the screen for a second, feeling a weird mix of emotions: amusement, disgust, and maybe even a little bit of satisfaction. This was the same woman who'd humiliated me, used me, and lied to my face for years. And now she wanted to talk? I laughed to myself, deleting the message without replying. There was nothing to say anymore. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. I leaned back, letting out a slow breath. When I first walked into the courtroom, I was broken, angry, confused. But now, I felt lighter. All the weight of the past, all the years of walking on eggshells, of living under her thumb, it was gone. I had nothing left to prove, no more battles to fight. I had reclaimed everything I needed to, and most importantly, I had finally found my dignity. My phone buzzed again, this time a reminder for another court date, the next phase of the investigation. It was a formality at this point, more of a confirmation that the damage was done. I'd won. I had the leverage, the truth, and now the freedom I had been waiting for. I thought about Laura again, picturing her sitting alone in her now empty mansion, the same one she thought she would have forever. She had no one now, not Scott, not the people who had supported her before. As soon as the gravity of the situation hit him, Scott was gone, just like everyone else. He wasn't sticking around to face the fallout from his part in all this. Laura was now just a shell of the woman she once was. She had no power, no one to back her up. And it was hard not to feel a little bit of satisfaction watching her face the consequences of everything she'd done. But for me, I had walked away from her, from the person who had controlled my life for so long. I was free. I could finally breathe. I stood up, tossing my phone onto the couch. There was nothing left for me here. I had a life to rebuild, and it wasn't going to be about her anymore. I stepped out into the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in years, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back.